At just 16 years old, Miranda Corsette was a teenager living in Gulfport, Florida. Life had already dealt her a difficult hand. A young mother, she had a lot of dreams and ambitions, but the harsh realities of life weighed heavily on her. Yet, like so many young people today, she still believed in the possibility of new beginnings. She wasn't like others who had given up on love or a better future. She believed it was out there somewhere. As a teen mother, Miranda had been through more than most. She was juggling the demands of raising a young child while trying to figure out her place in the world. It was a balancing act of caring for her child while dealing with the challenges of being a teenager. Despite the difficulties, Miranda remained optimistic about her future. She had dreams of a better life for herself and her child, a life free from the cycle of struggle she had known so far. But what she didn't know was that her search for love, her desire for companionship, would be met with tragedy instead of hope. Her dreams were simple. She just wanted to feel like she belonged, to find someone who would love and care for her, someone who wouldn't judge her past. But her search for a connection in a digital world, where faceless strangers can hide behind screens, would soon turn into a nightmare she could not escape. Miranda didn't know what to expect when she swiped right on Stephen Gress, a 35-year-old man who appeared to be kind, easygoing, and friendly. They met in a dating app. They exchanged messages for a few days, talking about their lives, their hopes, and the things that made them happy. Stephen seemed different from the others she had met before. There was something about him that felt real, genuine even. That's why Miranda agreed to meet him. She never could have known that this was the beginning of a relationship that, in hindsight, should have never happened. For Miranda, it all seemed innocent. A meet-up to see if there was chemistry. But what she didn't know was that Stephen wasn't just some guy looking for love. He was part of a couple whose capacity for cruelty was beyond imagination. Stephen shared his life with Michelle Brandis, a 37-year-old woman who appeared to be loving, supportive, and even caring. Together, they seemed like an ordinary couple. Nothing about them seemed out of place. In fact, everything about them seemed perfectly normal. Miranda arrived at Stephen and Michelle's house, unaware that she was walking into a trap. They welcomed her with open arms, offered her food, made her feel comfortable. For a brief moment, everything seemed normal. There were no signs of danger, no alarms ringing in her head. She was a guest and everything felt like it was going well. But soon, Miranda would realize that the people who had invited her in weren't the kind, loving couple they appeared to be. They were wolves in sheep's clothing. It didn't take long for things to take a dark turn. Days after Miranda's arrival, a small ring went missing. It wasn't Miranda's, but Stephen and Michelle were convinced she had taken it. A trivial object, yet it became the spark that ignited the flames of violence. The accusations started slow, just a passing remark, but soon they grew louder, more accusatory, and more demanding. Miranda tried to explain that she had no idea where the ring was, but her pleas were met with harsh accusations. No evidence, no proof, just a belief that Miranda had stolen it. They weren't listening to her anymore. The trust they had built in the beginning was shattered, and now Miranda was at the mercy of two people who wanted to punish her for a crime she hadn't committed. What followed was not just physical violence, it was psychological torment. They told her that she had to confess, to admit to something she hadn't done. The abuse started small but quickly escalated. Each day the couple grew more violent, their patience running thinner. Their anger festered like a sickness, and it wasn't long before Miranda felt the full force of their wrath. The house that had once seemed like a refuge now felt like a cage, and she, a prisoner inside it. Miranda felt more trapped with each passing hour. She was alone in their house, away from her family, from anyone who could help. And the realization hit her like a ton of bricks. There was no escape. She couldn't leave, she couldn't call for help. They had already isolated her from everything and everyone. She felt like she was in a nightmare, one that she couldn't wake up from. And worst of all, she was slowly beginning to accept the horrifying truth that these people were not going to let her go. The tension in that house was thick, suffocating. The air heavy with anger and fear. It wasn't just about a stolen ring anymore. It was about power, control. And Miranda, the victim, had no choice but to endure. 4 days, Miranda was subjected to torment. It wasn't just the beatings. It was the emotional manipulation, the threats, the isolation, the constant feeling that she couldn't trust anyone, not even the couple who had once been kind to her. They were now her captors and she was their prisoner. Every day brought something new, a new threat, a new injury, a new scar physically and mentally. Miranda was beaten, bruised, and broken. Her body became a map of pain, each mark telling a story of the suffering she had endured. Every night she lay awake, wondering if it would ever stop, hoping someone would come to save her, but no one did. She had lost track of time. How many days had passed? Was anyone looking for her? Had anyone noticed she was missing? The days blurred together, each one feeling like an eternity. And then came the fateful day. February 20th, 2025. The day that Miranda's life would end in the most brutal way imaginable. Michelle Brandis, in a cold, calculated act, ended it all. She forced a billiard ball into Miranda's mouth and wrapped plastic around her face. The life slowly drained from Miranda's body. She suffocated in silence. And just like that, her world, her dreams, were gone. The violence didn't stop with her death. It was a brutal, suffocating end that left no room for hope, no room for escape. But Michelle and Stephen didn't just stop at killing Miranda. They dismembered her body, cutting it into pieces, discarding her remains in a dumpster in Ruskin, Florida. They didn't see her as a human being. They saw her as something disposable. An object to be discarded without a second thought. Her life, her identity, her very essence was erased in an instant. But there was no escaping the brutality of what they had done. It would haunt everyone who heard her story. The chilling nature of their actions was only made worse by their complete lack of remorse. Miranda wasn't just another victim to them. She was a thing. A thing to be discarded when no longer useful. What makes this crime even more disturbing is that others knew what was happening and chose to do nothing. Stephen's own mother received photos of Miranda's broken body. But instead of intervening, instead of calling the police, she stayed silent. She did nothing. She saw her son's cruelty and chose to look the other way. It's hard to comprehend the thought process of someone who would receive such horrific images and not act. How could anyone watch such cruelty and do nothing? How could a mother see her own son's actions and not step in? The silence of the witnesses to this crime is as chilling as the crime itself. Once Miranda's body was discovered, investigators worked tirelessly to piece together the mystery. They traced her final steps, uncovered the photos, and began to unravel the twisted truth. They soon discovered that Miranda had not just disappeared, she had been killed, and her body had been disposed of like trash. The investigation revealed the shocking details, but even those who had seen the abuse unfold had remained silent. Stephen and Michelle were arrested, charged with first-degree murder and kidnapping. But the question still lingered: how could two people who appeared so normal turn so monstrous? How could someone like Miranda, someone so young, so full of potential, be taken in such a horrific way? She had dreams, she had a future. And yet, all of that was ripped away in the most violent and senseless way. The trial was a painful ordeal for Miranda's family. The details of what had happened to her, what she had endured, were laid bare for the world to see. There was no hiding from the facts. There was no denying the brutality of what Stephen and Michelle had done. But the courtroom was not just about justice. It was about remembering Miranda. It was about ensuring her story wasn't forgotten. And then came the sentencing. Would they receive justice? Should they face the death penalty for what they had done? The community, still reeling from the shock, debated what the right punishment would be for such a heinous crime. How could anything in this world be enough to make up for what had been taken from Miranda? Miranda's story is one of tragedy, but also one of warning. She was just 16, just beginning to figure out who she was and what she wanted from life. She wanted love. She wanted safety. She wanted a future for herself and her child. But her future was stolen from her by a pair of monsters who saw her as nothing more than an object to be used and discarded. But Miranda's death should not be in vain. Her story, her life, must remind us to be vigilant, to protect those who are vulnerable, to speak out when we see something wrong. Because Miranda's life, though short, still carries the weight of a lesson for us all. As we close this documentary, we remember Miranda Corsette, a young woman who deserved so much more than what was taken from her. We remember her not just for the way she died, but for the life she could have lived. And we vow never to forget her story.